Conversations about the end of the world have been happening since Genesis, since Adam and Eve were walked out of the Garden of Eden. In fact, as early as Genesis 6, we hear about God being so dismayed by the wickedness of humanity that he caused a flood to come over the whole earth, saving only Noah and his family, wanting to start all over again. In our reading today, we hear about the disciples having the same conversation and asking Jesus, wanting all the details about how it's going to happen, what's going to happen. In many places throughout the gospel, Jesus had said to them that he would come again, and that would signal the end times. And many thought it would be in their lifetime, it would be imminent. In fact, later on in this same passage from Matthew, it says, "Truly I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place," which has caused much concern and much debate among scholars ever since. But here in this passage, Jesus is trying to tell his disciples that the end times, it's not going to happen the way you think. He cites a whole lot of things that the people of his time would understand. The people in that time would understand wars and famine and earthquakes. But other things, at the time of the writing of Matthew, which was some 30 to 40 years after Jesus' death, they were persecuted for carrying Christ's name, for following Jesus Christ. But Jesus says to them, all of those things, that's routine history. This is no sign of the end. And I think if we were to look around our world right now, we would agree that we see all of those things too. We just have to turn on the news to see most of these scenarios played out in our world. Our passage says, when reports come in of wars and rumored wars, keep your head and don't panic. This is routine history. Wars in our world right now, there are over 40 being fought, with lives lost every single day. According to the Institute for Economics and Peace, the world as a whole, it says, has been getting incrementally less peaceful every year since 2007, sharply bucking a trend that has seen a global move away from conflict since the end of World War II. But Jesus says, this is no sign of the end. Nation will fight nation, we read, and ruler fight ruler over and over. Our political landscape is absolutely fraught with rulers fighting rulers over and over. As we head into a federal election this fall, we're going to see politicians doing what politicians do best, slinging mud and feuding bitterly over and over. But this is no sign of the end. Famines and earthquakes will occur in various places, Jesus says. And we know that in our world there are entire nations of people that go hungry because of famine. According to Oxfam, the world stands on the brink of unprecedented famines. 30 million people are experiencing alarming hunger in South Sudan, Somalia, Yemen, and northeast Nigeria, to name just a few. And earthquakes? We've had earthquakes all up and down the west coast of North America, causing people to question if the big one is right around the corner and California is going to slip off into the ocean. But no, this is no sign of the end. They're going to throw you to the wolves and kill you, Jesus says. Everyone hating you because you carry my name. And we know that religious wars have taken place since religion was invented. People who couldn't agree on who or how to worship, and Christians, those who carry Christ's name, have been persecuted, and they still are. Trends show that in countries in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, there is intense persecution of Christians, and perhaps the most vulnerable are Christian women, who often face double persecution because of their faith and because of their gender. Reportedly, every month, on average, 345 Christians are killed for faith-related reasons. 105 churches or Christian buildings are burned or attacked. 219 Christians are detained without trial, arrested, sentenced, and imprisoned every month. But this still is no sign of the end. He goes on, Jesus says, and then going from bad to worse, it will be a dog eat dog, everyone at each other's throats, everyone hating each other. And I have had, I don't know how many conversations lately about how the world seems to be a lot harsher, a lot rougher. There's more bullying. There's more people attacking other people as they sit behind a keyboard. Conflict is more prevalent and more violent as people disagree, as groups clash over ideologies. But still, Jesus says, this is no sign of the end. He says the world has a long way to go, this world, before we end up on the scrap heap. But it doesn't sound like a world that we're really comfortable with, that we really want to be part of, does it? And here it is. Here's where we get to the heart of what I think Jesus is trying to say in this passage, what he's trying to impress upon his disciples, that the end of the world, the coming of the Son of God, will come precisely when we get to the end of all of this discouragement. When we get to the end of the world, to the end of this world, when we get to the end of our world, of hatred and greed and selfishness and anger, the end of the world as we know it, when we get to the end of this world, then the kingdom of God will begin. When we finally put aside everything that separates us from each other and from God and begin acting like God, then the kingdom of God will begin. Then the new world will begin. The kingdom of God here on earth. And that is a really good thing. It's not something to be feared. We have heard people preach about the end of the world as if it is something to just be terrified about. And I wonder if that isn't what Jesus meant by false teachers and preachers when he said, watch out for doomsday deceivers. Lying preachers will come forward and deceive a lot of people. It isn't the end of the world as we know it that should be preached, as something to be avoided, but rather something to be strived for, something to look forward to. We are given a glimpse, just a tiniest peek of what that could look like at the end of our Bible in Revelation 21. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God as a bride prepared for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, listen to this. See, the home of God is among mortals. He will dwell with them, and they will be his peoples. And God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more, for the first things have passed away. And the one who is seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." God will make all things new. In chapter 22, it says, Eden will be restored. Those are the things that Jesus wanted his disciples to know. And what he cautioned them about, the wars, the fighting, the famine, the earthquakes, the persecution, they'll be gone. They'll be gone when God and his Son, Jesus Christ, walks among us once again, as he did in the garden. The home of God is among mortals, and God himself will be with them. God with us. God able to walk alongside us, getting to know Jesus Christ, the Messiah. That sounds pretty good to me. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. That sounds like something quite lovely, rather than something to be feared. A world like that? Okay, I'm fine with that. I feel fine. That's the one I want to be in. That's the world I want to see. Hear what Jesus tells his disciples about what we do in the meantime, though. All during this time, the good news, the message of the kingdom will be preached all over the world. A witness staked out in every country, and then the end will come. When the whole world knows Jesus. When the whole world knows the good news, then the end will come. When the good news is preached, when people accept the good news of Jesus Christ, when people want to be like Christ, want to have the same mind as Christ, when people want to serve God, then the end will come. When the gospel is preached, a witness staked out in every country, when our missional mandate is fulfilled, the one we hear in Matthew 28, go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, then the end will come, not before. But in the last line of Matthew's gospel, just after this part, it says, and remember, I'm with you to the end of the age. You're not doing this alone. You're never alone. Jesus reiterates what he says in this passage earlier, staying with it. That's what God requires. Stay with it to the end. You won't be sorry, and you will be saved. Saved when the earth is reborn the way God intended it to be. For you and I, that means that we need to share the good news. We need to share the gospel. We need to go out into the world that is overrun with disillusionment and weeping and conflict and hatred, and share the message of the kingdom. Share the message of hope and joy. Share the message of love and peace. And then the end will come. Then it will be the end of the world as we know it. And I feel fine. Amen. Let's sing together, Follow Me, the Master said.